Welcome to the Veterans Voice, presented by the Veterans Club, where we sit down with candidates running for public office to discuss issues that matter to veterans and first responders. Our goal is simple: to give veteran voters a clear, unfiltered look at the people and policies shaping our communities and our nation.
All right, it's October 14th, 2025, and we're interviewing Randy Westlund, who is a candidate for mayor in the city of Post Falls. Randy, if you'd like to start with the intro, 3 to 5 minutes or so, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Randy Westlund, running for mayor of Post Falls. I'm on the city council right now, so I know how everything works and kind of where we can make some changes and adjustments. I'm a Christian husband and father, first and foremost. That's the most important thing to know about me. My faith guides everything that I do. And I think it's very important that we're bold about being Christians in public life. In my family life, we have our 5th child on the way in early December, maybe late November. So my oldest is 8 years old right now. So we're in the middle of the family life and really thinking about what are we leaving behind for our kids. And I think we have an obligation to make sure that we're leaving our country in a better shape for our descendants than how it is when we inherited it kind of from our ancestors. We need to be thinking generationally. I think there's an obligation for Christian stewardship that we need to make sure we're focusing on. So in the campaign, I think one of the biggest things that we need is a vision to know where we're going. That's kind of the basic platform of my campaign is but before we can really know what we want to do, we have to know where we want to go. And there's a lot of talk about recent changes and apartments and growth and things that are changing the quality of life around here. But I don't think it's enough to just define ourselves in terms of what we're against. I think we have to think about, what are you for? What do you want to accomplish? What's the positive vision that you want to go for? And once we have that positive vision laid out, then we can actually think about, what are we going to do to achieve that? And I think as conservatives, that positive vision should be built around family-friendly growth and development policies, and making sure that we're kind of doubling down on all the things that make America great, on home ownership, on individual liberty, and making sure that we're implementing all of that in public policy.
Right, okay. Well, you've been on the city council now. This is your maybe the end of your first year on there.
Second year.
What have you seen in Post Falls do you think needs the most attention?
I've seen a lot of growth, obviously, a lot of apartments going up. And I don't think anybody is happy about the changes here and how it's impacting the quality of life or how we're planning for infrastructure maintenance long term. And the problem I'm seeing is if we don't have a vision of where we want to go, then again, we're never going to get there. And so there's a lot of, I don't like the apartments. I don't like the stuff coming in. I don't like all the road widenings that are coming in. It's changing the area. It's changing the character of the area. And I think we need to focus on, what do we want? And what is the character of the area that we want to preserve? Let's define that. And let's figure out what we think that should look like. If we were to, say, start with a blank slate and say, we're designing a city for our children and grandchildren to inherit, we should think about, okay, what would that be? And let's think about that for a minute. Do a vision exercise. What city do you want your children and grandchildren to inherit? And I think about that a lot with my kids. And I want them to inherit a good place to live that has the quality of life that we enjoy today. I want them to be able to buy a home and participate in the American dream in that way, and have a community that really supports conservative values, which is, I think, the reason why a lot of us are here. And I don't see that kind of planning happening today. I think that's really important, that we're actually kind of looking where we need to go and we're not just floating adrift. I think most people, if you ask them, will tell you that it just feels like we're sort of floating, and developers are able to come in and do whatever they want, and it's impacting our quality of life. And there's a sense of loss of control or loss of agency. Mm-hmm. Are we actually able to steer this ship and kind of make sure we're going in the right direction? I believe we can.
All right. With the growth being what everyone here thinks is a problem, what do you think is reasonable growth? We can't stop the growth. We're not going to be able to do that. We have to continue growing, but I think it has to be responsible. And I think you've said that in some of your campaign literature. What do you envision for responsible growth?
Yes, I think the rate of change is something we should look at. With any complex system like a city, rapid changes that bring a lot of things happening at once are generally hard to account for and accommodate. I think that we should be very careful about eating up the prairie. I don't want to see wall-to-wall cities. I want to make sure we preserve some county living around here, and that we're not just sprawling with the sort of California-style sprawl that I think we've seen ruin the livability in a lot of American cities. What we need in Post Falls is really economic development and growth of good jobs. because Post Falls has the lowest jobs to housing ratio of all the cities in the area. So we're mostly a bedroom community. We have no real downtown, and we need one. That's the kind of development that we need is really that commercial growth and bringing in the business kind of aspect here to make sure that we have the jobs that are going to support the local housing market. One of the recent trends we've seen is that the median income is no longer connected to the median home value. In other words, making the standard kind of median wage around here, you're not going to be able to afford a home. And so that's a problem for our economy. It's a problem for our children growing up here. How are they going to get into this kind of home ownership? So the kind of growth that I would like to see is starter homes that are family-friendly starter homes that get our young families in a home having equity in something, even if it's not the forever home. Getting that equity, able to have a couple children and start a family and really get going and get on that ladder of American homeownership, together with the economic growth that's going to provide the jobs to support everything long term.
Right, right. You've also mentioned that growth should pay for itself. How does it do that?
Yes, there's the system that's set up right now is impact fees. And so when new development comes in, the developer pays impact fees to the city, which is a one-time cost that they put in. And they also pay to put in the initial infrastructure, which then gets handed over to the city for long-term maintenance. One of the problems we're seeing is not with the initial costs going in, it's with the long-term maintenance, which not enough people are looking at. So for example, a new neighborhood goes in, and in the short term, it provides the city with revenue because there's permitting fees, there's impact fees that are collected, and the developer paid the cost for the upfront infrastructure. But then we have to maintain that in perpetuity. And 20 years from now, 25 years from now, when we have to go in and repave those streets, then you have to look at, okay, how much does that actually cost? It's a lot of money. It's a lot more than most people realize. And most of the neighborhoods going in, we're actually losing money long term. There's a short term influx of cash from the growth, which usually gets spent on projects from 20 years ago. And then there's the long term negative. And we can end up in this almost like a Ponzi scheme where we have to keep growing in order to pay for the maintenance yesterday because we have this short term benefit, but then long term liability. And that's really one of the big things we need to look at with the growth.
Right. Now, what are the impact fees being used for?
Impact fees are used for expanding infrastructure to accommodate new growth. So they go into a special account and they can't be used for salaries. They can't be used for maintenance or anything else. It's only when expanding. So for example, we have impact fees that we collect for parks. If we're going to do a new park or a new structure that's that we can say is connected to the growth, that's we're expanding this because of the growth, then we can use impact fees on that. We can't use impact fees to fund normal operations. And as normal operations get more expensive, sometimes we can run into situations where we have impact fees that we can't spend on operations, even though those are getting more expensive because they're restricted funds that sit aside. And generally in Idaho, you have to spend impact fees within a certain amount of time.
8 years.
Otherwise, they're credited back. Yes.
Right, right. Has there been any thought about going to the state legislators and asking them to extend that 8-year period out to 18 years or even 28 years? Because all of this growth that's going on here right behind us, we don't need a new school right now. We don't need, they did put in a park over there, but there's a lot of things that we're going to need when they're finished with this in 10 years. But that 8 years is already up and you've had to give that money back.
Yes.
Is there any chance of getting that extended, talking to the legislators?
Yeah, I think that's a likely change that would come down the road in the next few years because there are situations that I think happen where we have impact fees and we're in a situation where it's like spend it or lose it. And so then you have to spend it on something.
Right.
And maybe it would have been better if you could have saved it for another 5 years until you really needed it for the bigger project. But you end up in this position where, if you have to spend it or lose it, then that gives kind of perverse incentives. So there's this like, well, let's spend it today. And so I think that changing the guardrails around impact fees would probably be very good to give us more flexibility because ultimately money is fungible. And saying that funds are restricted only means so much when everything else can be moved around as a result.
Exactly, exactly. Now, the current mayor has talked about needing to keep building to get more residents out there, more apartments out there to drive the prices down. Do you think that's something that's practical to try to do?
No, I think we're in a situation, kind of a unique situation because we have so many people who want to live here, who are leaving cities in California and Washington that were run into the ground with liberal policies. And they're looking at Idaho as a life raft. Like, let's go there where things still feel like America. And so we're in a situation where there's effectively unlimited demand. because we can build housing all day, we can build all over the prairie, and temporarily maybe the price of homes goes down, and then more people move here and it goes right back up. Because we're not in a closed system and we have that immigration pressure from other states in the country, that really changes the market dynamics to say this is not simple supply and demand because we're not within just one system. We do have a housing shortage nationally, and that needs to be addressed everywhere with building. But I don't think we should put it all in our backyard.
Right, exactly. What about apartments? Do you think we've reached our limit on apartments in this city yet?
Yes, and the market is telling us that too. We had, since the crash in 2008, the construction industry was very slow to recover, like it usually is. And we were underbuilding homes for a very long time. And we are behind where we would be nationwide in terms of number of homes if that crash had not happened. So in that respect, we're behind where we would have been,
Right.
which is creating some scarcity in the housing market. But at the same time, we have all of these apartments going in, which are not providing an opportunity for home ownership. And I think that's a real problem. And we can build more apartments, but they're not really what the people here want. And one of the challenges we have with that is it's not helping people get into the American dream, into home ownership. I think it's leading people toward this place of being a nation of renters. And we don't want to be a nation of renters. I think other Western nations have that as a characteristic where very few people kind of own the land that they're on. But that's something that really sets America apart, that we own the land generally that we live on. We have that ability for home ownership. And that gives us this sense of independence, that gives us that American spirit that I think is really important. And we've seen this even in the market where we have all of these apartments coming online at the same time because there was pent up demand. And we had a couple of years where the city was permitting 400 or 500 multifamily units, apartments per year. And that's gone down to like 20 or 30 a year. So a lot of those came online at the same time, and that caused vacancy rates to go up, which means developers stopped building them. So the market is even saying you have too many apartments. And we've done studies in the city too. We have had consultants come in and say, yes, you have too many apartments. So we have that loud and clear. We know that we have too many apartments. Now we need to focus on what's actually good for our local families.
I have people that don't even live in Post Falls, and when I meet them and I say I live in Post Falls, and they say, how many more apartments do you need over there in that city?
Yes.
Yeah, we've got plenty of them right now. What is your opinion on the, I don't know if the correct term is urban renewal or redevelopment zones in Post Falls?
I have mixed feelings on urban renewal. I think it can be used well in narrow cases where you're bringing in jobs and commercial growth and focusing on that. If the infrastructure that you're putting in is something that you needed anyway for the city, the best case scenario is that you're effectively getting an interest-free loan from the developer to put in public infrastructure, which you then pay back, again, with no interest, only from the increment in property values, only if the property values go up. So there's a chance you don't even have to repay the loan. But urban renewal gets abused, I think, as a handout for developers in a lot of cases. And that's not what it was supposed to be. Urban renewal is designed to be providing an incentive to redevelop areas of blight within a city. And we don't have that here. We don't have the sort of inner city blight where we need to bulldoze slums and rebuild something. And so there was a provision added to urban renewal law, I think a couple decades ago, that made an allowance for disadvantaged border communities. And that's the exception that we're using in North Idaho for all these urban renewal districts to say we're a disadvantaged border community because of Spokane. And because of that, we can use urban renewal for greenfield development. And so if we're not careful about how it's used, then it can be used as just a handout. So I think we should have some reform of urban renewal law at the state level. And I would like to have some alternative tools to bring in jobs that are not using urban renewal.
Right. The concern that I hear from people is about who's handling the tax money for that, because it doesn't go back into the city's fund. It goes back into the urban renewal district. Is that the developers that handle that?
The urban renewal district is it's a board set up by the city. So the board members on the urban renewal are appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the council, and they operate the district. So in the ideal case, the developer pays for the initial infrastructure that's public infrastructure. We're not talking about sidewalks necessarily. It could be like putting in an intersection where we can say, we want to have this warehouse or this commercial growth coming in, but we would need an intersection here, and the city doesn't have the money for it right now. So we could say no, and the developer could go somewhere else, or we could say, okay, you, the developer, pay for this right now, and then we're going to, from the increment, repay you. So that increment goes into the urban renewal district's bank account, and then they can reimburse slowly over time the expenses that were incurred by a developer to do that. And then any additional funds go back to the taxing districts when it's closed. Mm-hmm. So in the ideal case, it may not cost the taxpayers anything extra, but that's not always the ideal case.
Right, right. Budget. Where can the city, it was kind of a strange thing that I heard coming out that they were going to raise the taxes by something like 9% property taxes. But then all of a sudden, and they said they were going to recoup that 3% that they didn't get from the year previous and the year previous to that and so forth. And now apparently that's gone away. They said, no, we don't need the money. So what's really the budget?
Yeah, there's been a lot
now?
of fake information going out there about how the city's budget actually works. What happens is in Idaho, each taxing district can increase their levy by 3% a year to account for inflation. Post Falls opted not to do that for like 12 years in a row. It was 0%, 0%, 0%, while other cities were doing 3% every year. And that was good in the short term, but it also created a situation where we're like, okay, if the growth is slowing down, if we're going to stop improving apartments, then we need to look at how we're actually going to maintain all of this. Because we had I think a period of time where there was a lot of infrastructure being put in that was added to the city's books without the forethought about how to actually maintain that. So the previous year's budget cycle, there was the 3% increase plus 1% from foregone. And then there was a one-time 3% that was a levy for capital projects, which we used to get the police department's parking lot on schedule. Because what we saw is we can actually save a lot of taxpayer money by building this now. When we have something we know we need to build and we know it's getting more expensive, we can use that and actually get it done ahead of time. And then in this year's budget, we did the standard 3%, so no foregone, and it didn't increase anybody's taxes because it was replacing a one-time 3% that was coming off from before. But even with this, because of the growth and because of the shift between residential and commercial, while the tax levy was increasing in dollar amount, the median home in Post Falls saw taxes paid go down, which has been a good trend because there was a shift from commercial to residential when everybody's house value doubled, and then the business values didn't double, so that shifted property taxes. Now things are shifting back. So even with accounting for inflation and everything, taxes on most homes are going down, which is a good direction.
Getting to be able to relieve some of the property taxes. I don't know how much of the budget in Post Falls is from property taxes.
It's about a third. That's
Okay.
from property tax, and about a third comes from the state, and the other about a third comes from charges for service, which is development fees, anything you go to City Hall to pay.
Yes.
And this is talking just about the general fund, not about water. That's all separate.
What about, there's a state law that does not allow cities with a population over 10,000 to charge a bed tax. Is that something you think should look at being changed so that
Yes.
we could do that here in Post Falls with the hotels that we have?
Yeah, I think we need the local option tax to be expanded. I think the state legislature has been hesitant to do that because there are maybe more complexities if you have different cities and counties within the state having different tax rates because they have whatever local option tax implemented. But a lot of states do this, and I think it can set up a better incentive because we can shift things away from property tax onto a consumption tax. And especially with the local option resort tax, if we can have it paid for by some of the tourists who are coming in, who are otherwise not paying taxes, but who come here and enjoy the quality of life in the summer.
They use all our
the
services,
infrastructure.
911,
Exactly, yes.
fire, police, EMS, so on and so forth, all of the hunting, fishing, or whatever it should be. So
yes, and one of the problems we have, I think, with the sales tax system right now is that the money doesn't stay local. Sales tax goes directly to the state, and the state takes about 5% of the sales tax collected and redistributes that to the cities based mostly on population, not based on where it was collected. I think this is a major flaw in our sales tax formula, which means the state is giving the city a financial incentive to grow in population, not to grow in economic productivity, because it doesn't make any difference to our budget whether we have more businesses in Post Falls or in Coeur d'Alene or somewhere else in the state.
Right.
It's all going into the same pot.
Right.
And I think the local option tax would give us a step in the right direction to be able to say, let's take some of the sales tax that's coming off of our local economic transactions and actually keep that local and use it for our own local streets and infrastructure.
Right, right. Yeah, there's a lot of improvements that could be made to help the cities out versus that. What about the police department? You've mentioned about having safe streets. What do you mean by that? And do you think Post Falls needs to be any safer? Have we reached our limit of how safe it can be?
I think we're falling behind on that. We have, I think, 63 sworn officers and then administrative staff. Our officers per 1,000 is lower than the surrounding cities. and we're bordering with Washington, and there's a lot more crime coming over from Spokane than there used to be because they don't have their crime problems under control. And so when you combine that with the drug trafficking corridor called I-90 that goes right through the middle of our town, we are in many ways the first line of defense for the trafficking that comes across the border and for crime from Spokane. I think safe streets are one of the most important things we can do if we want to be good conservatives and keep family values as the sort of centerpiece of what we're focusing on. Then safe streets, good schools, and quality infrastructure are really important, and we have to focus on those. So I think that the recent growth and just trends nationwide is going to cause us to have maybe more problems and have to spend a little more on public safety. But I think that's really important that we maintain that quality of life, because I do not want to see budget cuts, especially in public safety, because that is really what's driving the quality of life here. People come here because it's safe, because our crime rate is low. And if we start cutting services, then we're going to lose what makes us special.
Right. Do you know what has brought about the fact that the dispatch for the police in Post Falls is their own dispatch and not combined with the county? Because every other police department in the county is run through, every other city in the county runs their dispatch through the county.
Yeah, there are some unusual arrangements that are just kind of historical accidents between the cities. As an example, Post Falls does the legal prosecution for Hayden and Rathdrum. We also do the wastewater treatment for Rathdrum. And so the way that these services get distributed sometimes is just kind of awkward by historical accident. And sometimes it's, maybe we want to qualify for this grant. And so we're going to set up the district this way, so we have these things in common. And it's just, it made something easier at the time it was initially set up. But maybe doesn't, it may not necessarily be the ideal system. But we're also seeing issues between Hayden and the county dealing with law enforcement issues. So maybe there's some value in having a layer of separation.
Yeah, I think there is. There's some things I think could be combined. Maybe the dispatch. How about the SWAT team? It's extremely expensive to have your own SWAT team and not combine it. So I think I'm not sure the county and Coeur d'Alene, I don't know if the Rathdrum's involved in the SWAT team or not, but it's very expensive to have your own SWAT team. A lot of training time put involved in that.
There is, yeah. I think I like the system we have set up where there are individuals who are not necessarily a standing SWAT team, but they're at this higher level of expectation where when there is an incident, they're going to come together to form that team to go take care of whatever it is that is the threat. And there are more of these, I think, nationwide with what we saw in Canfield Mountain and what we've seen with schools being shot up nationwide, where some of these, I think, crazy left-leaning people who are maybe on gender-changing hormones decide that they're going to go take out their anger on children or something. And so we have to be ready to handle these kind of new threats.
Yes, indeed. What about the aesthetics of Post Falls? I'm not sure. Most of Post Falls looks pretty doggone good, except when you go down Spokane Street here from Pole Line and you look at the west side of the street and you think, what in the world city is this? Is there anything that can be done about that to keep the aesthetics up? And I'm not sure, because there's not an HOA on that side of the street. There is on the east side, but should the city be maintaining that, or is that the property owner's responsibility?
I think it comes in two levels. One is if it's already set up, if it's an existing property, a lot of those have HOAs, some of them don't. I think most of that falls to the individual citizen as the responsibility to maintain their property. And when we have a lot of beautiful properties and we prioritize that in the community, nobody wants to be the one who looks ugly in a row of nice looking houses. And so this is one area where everything that we do to make the city look a little better, whether individually or as a city, I think contributes to this culture of beautification. And beauty in public buildings is really important. I think that's something that we can look at for the new construction going in. A lot of it, I think, is ugly. It's the cheapest possible thing that can go in sometimes. And there are economic reasons driving that. But we have opportunities to try to address some of that within the city. For example, we could do a design review commission. Coeur d'Alene has one, which they apply to the downtown properties. Post Falls does not have one. And it can be a double-edged sword because it's maybe using more government. In the best case, we could have a design review commission with a narrow goal of saying, make it look beautiful and make it family friendly and not get too much into the weeds. On the other hand, design review can become just another layer of bureaucracy that's dealing with little things like what color is this and what exactly is that. That just ends up driving housing prices up. And so whether that, I think, is a benefit or a harm depends a lot on the specific mission and who would be on such a committee. So those are tools that we could use, but like anything in government, It can be done well or it can be done poorly, and we have to be very careful with what we decide to take on.
Right, right. Well, that's all the questions I have. Do you have anything you'd like to close with?
Yeah, I think that we should be very intentional about where we're going in the future. And I think we have a lot of good reason to be hopeful and to be excited about the future. I think the best days of Post Falls are still ahead of us. I believe strongly in Trump's mission for a new golden age of America. I think he's doing really good work. I'm a big fan of his foreign policy and the tariffs that he's doing. I know there's short-term pain with that, but I think the benefits long-term are going to be really good for reshoring American manufacturing. And that's where my career has been focused for the past 10 years. As a day job, I work with American manufacturing businesses all over the country, helping them find more efficiencies, streamlining their workflows, making them operate better, and then bringing in technology or software to help guide that process. So to kind of lock them into, here we are, we're going to compete on the global market now. We're going to get off of the pen and paper, and we're going to go to something better. We're going to use technology. I think that's really the story of America, is finding gains through innovation. Other countries have maybe cheap manufacturing right now because they have cheap labor and they're not respecting workers' rights and all this stuff. And we have problems with child slave labor in some factories in China and everything. In America, we don't do that. We place a very high value on the human dignity and respecting people. And the way that we compete globally has always been through innovation. And so bringing that innovation to America is really important. And I think Post Falls is primed for that. We're not built out in the same way that Coeur d'Alene is. There's a little more opportunity in Post Falls to build something unique, to say, we're going to have economic activity here. We're going to have a downtown that's going to be special. That's not just a tourist destination. I think we can do better than that. I think we can have real local commerce that serves the local community and is not oriented toward just serving tourists. And we also have a large area along Pleasant View on the west side of town that's primed for industrial and that kind of manufacturing. And so Post Falls, I think, is positioned to become something that's I think really special and an economic center that will be better than Coeur d'Alene. And I think in population, we're likely to pass Coeur d'Alene in the next 10 years anyway. And so we can, I think, create something that we will be proud to hand off to our children.
Great, great. Well, Randy, I certainly appreciate you sitting down with us today for the Veterans Club, and we'll get this posted, and good luck to you in your campaign.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Thanks for listening to The Veterans Voice, a program of the Veterans Club. To learn more, explore upcoming episodes, or connect with our veteran community, visit theveteransclub.org. Stay informed, stay involved, and remember, your voice is your vote.